Yeah, okay. So, let's see what happens. Should go on to the first slide, hopefully. There we go. So, yes, really lovely to see you all here. Lots of friends from lots of different places. I'm going to try very hard to fit 35 years into 15 minutes. So, apologies, it's going to be a bit of a quick romp through. When the City of London acquired Burnham Beeches back in 1880, they acquired it at least partly because of the old trees there. And from the very early years, a lot of the superintendents were very interested in trying to keep the trees alive. And I think very much at that stage for aesthetic reasons rather than from their biodiversity reasons. But very important, Le Sieur, who was the superintendent in the 1930s, and he produced the image on the left-hand side there, which we have the original in the Burnham Beeches office, showing a cross-section of a tree and it's when it was pollarded. Bringing us up into the sort of 1950s and 60s, there was bits of work done, but by the time we got into the 70s, I think the prevailing feeling was that actually you couldn't really do anything with these big old beech trees at Burnham Beeches, that they were starting to fall apart, that they wouldn't respond to any work. So there was a sort of feeling at that point, maybe a slight despondency over the trees. But these two people changed that image, I think. Ian Turney, who was superintendent from the 1984, and he came into Burnham Beeches and I think started to sort of realise that the high biodiversity value of the trees. He appointed Mark Frater, who's in the audience today, who became head keeper at that time, and the two of them started sort of taking things forward about the old trees at Burnham Beeches. And Ian introduced me to Ted, and Ted, I think, probably doesn't really need much of an introduction to most of us, but Ted was working at Windsor at the time and really starting to sort of galvanise work on sort of awareness raising of ancient trees, and was quite influential in starting things off at Burnham Beeches. So we, on sort of Ian's push, we organised a couple of conferences, the first one in Burnham Beeches in 1991. This conference today was supposed to be 30 years on from that conference, but we didn't quite get our act together, so we're a little bit late on that one. But the nice image on the left-hand side was drawn by Ian's sister as the sort of conference logo. And the delegates at the conference, we had Peter Hammond, Francis Rose and Oliver Rackham, all in one of our fantastic old pollard trees, the one that's actually now known as the cage pollard. And one of the things that Ian sort of set off was, although everybody was a little bit concerned about working on the old trees, he recognised that actually one of the ways to learn was perhaps to start cutting some young pollards, so learn some information and how they responded, and then perhaps apply that to the old ones. So this is one of the plots that he set up in the 1980s, cutting the trees in a variety of different ways and then starting to learn from them. And so those early lessons really was that cutting a lapsed pollard is perhaps not the same as cutting a tree that's in a regular cycle, which means that you've got to apply different techniques, have a different sort of mindset. The importance of light, that even with a beech tree and quite a young one, you need plenty of light, but not too much that you can overdo it. And also the imbalance of branches being cut and left. So those branches making sure that you leave some branches on the tree and not cutting all of them off. And armed with some of that information with the young trees, we then went on to work on some of the old ones. And you'll see some of our work tomorrow. As well as what was happening in Burnham Beeches, things were happening across Britain as a whole. Formation of the ancient tree form, really sort of led by Ted and getting everybody together to go and visit sites, go and stand underneath trees and talk about them. And then there was also the Veteran Trees Initiative, which was an English nature coordinated programme. And I can remember at the time that we were very pleased that the Ancient Tree Forum was actually getting recognition and being involved within that project, which was a nationwide project, but generally based on the various different statutory agencies. And one of the things that the Veteran Trees Initiative did was to fund the publication of Veteran Trees, A Guide to Good Management, which sort of brought together the information that we had at that time. And that's since been translated into various different languages. And For our Belgian colleagues, I put up a picture of the Belgian one, and for our Spanish colleagues, I put a picture of the Spanish one. And one of the things that I did in producing that book was to try and pull together the historical information that we had at the time about pollards. And we had quite a lot of information, but not always very helpful. So we have Fitzherbert in 1523 saying that you shouldn't pollard trees when the wind was in the north or the east, which is possibly not terribly helpful for us all of the time. Then we have Thomas Tusser in 1580, who has quite a little bit about pollards, and one of the things he said is, in lopping old yoakum for fear of mishap, one bough stay unlopped to cherish the sap. The second year after, then boldly ye may, for dripping his fellows that bough cut away. So that's the first sort of indication of leaving a sap riser or leaving branches on the trees rather than just cutting them all off. Moving much more recently, we have Edlin in 1971, who wrote an article called Goodbye to the Pollards, and it was really pessimistic. And he reckoned that, we sort of estimated that by the year 2000, there were maybe a few oak pollards left, but we wouldn't have any trees of any other species. It's quite interesting to perhaps reflect on that after the year 2000. And then, rather more optimistic, Mitchell in 1989 actually did a sort of another review, which was really helpful for me, looking at large neglected pollards. And one of the key things that he suggested was the importance of actually starting some new pollards, so starting new ones to replace the old ones. But interestingly, when I went back to his paper quite recently, one of the things he suggested was, because of the large numbers of trees at Epping Forest, that trials should be carried out at Epping Forest in cutting some of the older trees. And this is for Tom. Just to highlight that, as well as bringing together the information from Britain, we also, of course, started to realise that pollards are not a unique British feature. They're found all over the world. On the left-hand side is the Dominican Republic, and that's a leguminous tree that was being cut for its poles. Sorry about the picture on the right-hand side. It's not a very good picture, but that's from Uzbekistan, when I was out there collecting millipedes, and these are mulberry pollards cut for silkworms. And we have a nice poster about mulberry pollards in the poster in behind here, so do go and have a look later. So sort of armed with all of this information and increasing awareness about what was happening in Europe, I was very fortunate to have a Churchill Fellowship in 2003. And for those of you who are British, it is a fantastic way of being fully funded to go and do what you love doing in another country and finding out what's happening in other places. So I started off in Norway, Sweden, and the Åland Islands, so up in Scandinavia, looking at pollarded trees cut for largely for the leaves, for the foliage to feed the animals in the winter. And these are probably incredibly unusual. They're elm pollards, and looking very good when we saw them. I don't know what they're like now. And then to Romania and Hungary, where we found some beech pollards. These are in Romania, and beech pollards really sort of more or less cut within a cycle, just coming to the end where people are stopping to cut them. And then finally down to France, calling at Boursay, to the Maison Botanique, which we'll learn a little bit more about later on, and then down to the south of France and the north of Spain into the Basque Country. And this was where I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, because just fantastic numbers of beech pollards. And this is Oianlecu in the Basque Country, and that is Burnham Beeches, an image drawn from an old postcard. So very similar sort of aspect to the pollards. And there I met the Elosegui family, and we have Miguel Mari, who's going to talk in a few moments, so I won't say too much about the trees there, who introduced me to some of the charcoal makers who actually could remember cutting the trees in the past, could guide us in the ways of cutting them. And we were able to do some things in the Basque Country that perhaps we couldn't do in England because of the numbers of trees there. So we were able to look at comparing axes and chainsaws, looking at cutting in different moon phases. And there's a poster about some of this, and Miguel Mari's going to talk quite a bit more about it in a few moments. And then been fortunate to travel with a range of other people. Ted and Jill visiting lots of different places with pollarded trees. and both of them helped me on one occasion measuring the trees and the responses of the trees that were the ones that cut in different moon phases. This is Vicky and Reg on our holidays, where it was exceedingly wet on one day, and we had our lunch eaten by the sheep on another day, so it was quite an eventful trip. But lots of people helping us there, and some various sort of guidance that we were able to produce as a result. So then that takes me to the Vet Tree project. So this was a European-wide project with partners from 5 different countries, 6 different languages, various people in the audience that have been involved in that project over the years. And that was to develop training courses, a 1-day foundation course, a 3-day train the trainer course, and then a range of materials that went with that. So that was videos about different topics and also various other bits and pieces. When that finished, this was us trialling one of the courses in Romania. Actually, you probably can't see, I was hoping to be able to say that Vicky and I were now fluent in Romanian, because you might be able to see that it's Romanian on the screen, but actually the delegates had earphones and simultaneous translation. This was also very memorable because we were sat in the far right-hand corner and there was an air brick, and the air brick came from a cold store where there was a dead bear hanging up. So it got increasingly smelly as the day went on. So that was followed by the Vet Tree project. Sorry, I've gone back the wrong way. That was followed by the Vet Cert project with a similar range of partners, but we managed to add on France and the Czech Republic. And since then, it's been rolled out more widely to other countries as well. So this is setting up a certification system for both for practitioners, so those people cutting the trees, and for the consultants, those advising on the tree management. And one of the aims was to raise the standards of veteran tree management. And I, at the time, I think I couldn't quite get my head around how that was going to work. But in fact, I think it really has worked, that it's really pushing everybody to sort of learn more about veteran trees, and also to learn about what's going on in other countries, to make sure that we're not keeping isolationist, and that we manage to keep an eye on what's happening elsewhere and best practice. So that's, and part, as well as the certification process, we also have some fact sheets, and we also put together a 2-day training course that runs with that. And I'm sure many of you have participated that, and many of you are certified as well. This is the Vet Cert group, so including our colleagues from Czech Republic, standing under nice beech pollards, just to keep the pollard theme going. So bringing us back to Burnham Beeches then, the situation, I think, is becoming far more critical at Burnham Beeches, although despite us doing the best we can, trying to manage our trees and keep them alive as long as possible, we're perhaps becoming increasingly interventionist in terms of using other methods, so things like propping and tethering and cable bracing, and we'll see some of these and look at them in a bit more detail tomorrow. One of the things we've been trying to do at Burnham Beeches is lots of monitoring of what we've been doing, or recording what we've been doing. So every tree that's cut, both the young pollard and the old pollard, is recorded, what happens to it. And we're doing regular sort of reviews of the trees to do the work programme. On the left-hand side, this is the guys from Hampstead who help us quite a lot with our pruning, using a high line to access a tree that they couldn't actually put anchor points in and climb on its own. And increasingly starting to think about using sort of more modern technology. So this is LiDAR on the right-hand side, and we'll be experiencing LiDAR tomorrow, hopefully outside as well. And we've got a short talk on it later today. And then one of the key things I think is passing on to the next generation. And I think we're fortunate at Burnham of having quite a few younger, newer staff coming through now. We've got the Experts of the Future programme from the Ancient Tree Forum, also bringing on young people to become the experts of the future. And the Vet Cert, I think, programme is also helping to do that, to try and keep things going, keep the sort of bringing on the next generation and providing a sort of structured programme for them within their training. And I think this is really what I think the talk should have been called, about standing on the shoulders of others. This is currently what ChatGPT thinks a pollard looks like, despite a bit of training. So I think there's probably room out there for some better pictures of pollards for it to be trained on. But really, it's sort of we're all building on each other, aren't we? We're standing on each other's shoulders, we're building on the people that have come before, and we're setting the basis for the people that are coming after us. So finally, just a thank you to all of those people that have been involved in, as Ted, I think, repeatedly says, it's a journey. We're all on a journey. And certainly I feel like I've been on a journey, both sort of literally and visiting all of these different places, looking at pollards in different places, and also mentally as you sort of develop your ideas about things by seeing things. And we have Dominique down here who's going to talk to us later on, Tom, Jeremy Dagley, Jill's not a brilliant picture of you, Ted, yes, Jose Miguel, and Carl Adam, who would have been nice to have here, Neville, who also, I can't be here with us, and Caroline and Miguel Mari. So thank you all very much for a fantastic journey. Thank you perhaps also to Mark, I should say, for being a bit of a pollard widower, although he does actually quite enjoy coming and visiting some of these places as well, so I'm fortunate that he's also quite interested in trees. Thank you.